And as we're talking about smartphones and where they're going, you made a video recently about how like 2017 is the year of killing the bezels because not functionally it doesn't add too much of a difference, but it just looks cool. And as we run out of more functional things for our phones to do, I think it does fall to the aesthetics of, it starts to become a beauty contest as to why people will choose certain phones. So I'm curious if you have any ideas, like say next year or 2019 or into the 2020s, we kill the bezel. The screen to body ratio is 100%. We got all the screen. What happens after that? Like, where do we go from there?
That's true. Then we start looking at the back of the phone, I guess.
Yeah.
It gets weird. I guess the one thing I notice about like all these rumors and about like upcoming phones is as much as we know about like the internals of the phone and the way, like the iPhone, for example, the rumors have been like, all right, maybe it'll have wireless charging. That's cool. We know it'll run iOS. We have the software already. We know exactly what it's going to run. We know it'll have faster hardware. The camera will be slightly improved, but what will it look like? Like, that's the one mystery, the design, the one thing Apple can try to keep a secret, and other smartphone companies can try to better Apple or do things differently. It seems like a lot of the hype, at least initially, for what we think of a smartphone, your gut impression, when you look at it in a store, when you see the reveal video on YouTube behind the presenter, it's like, do I like the way it looks or not? And I think people have a hard time buying a phone that they don't like the way it looks. I think we're also really used to the way the iPhone looks, so whether you like it or not, it's just kind of standard. But yeah, I guess ideally, we go to 100% screen to body ratio. We don't have anything to change on the front. Maybe you can curve the glass a little bit and that's it, but then you look around at the back of the phone and people still, oddly enough, complain about the way the back of a phone looks.
Yeah.
Which is like, you see that in the store and you see that on the box and you see that in the ads, but when you actually buy the phone, are you ever looking at the back of the phone?
Right?
I don't know.
Yeah,
like people,
it's always
the ugliest part of the phone, and I don't really mind. So
sure.
Yeah, there's a bunch of weird.
That's not how you can't use it.
There's a bunch of weird things about the way smartphones look that have a lot of hype behind them, but I think eventually, we ideally just have a screen on the front. That's the future I look forward to.
With Yeah, me too. It's just like I'm kind of at a loss of ideas. We can only get so much faster. We can improve on things we've already created. With iPhone rumoring to have Face ID, improved mechanisms, but not truly different way to use the phone. Still, you're just going to be scrolling through Twitter and texting people just like you do now. And the camera's getting better and the specs are getting better. But really, I think that's the big crisis smartphone companies are going to start running into is what if, I feel like as time goes on, phones all start to kind of look the same more and more as they're trying to reach this removal of all bezels idea. Because once we get there, then from the front, all of our phones are really going to look identical.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We just got this V30, and it looks like from the front almost indistinguishable from the Note 8. Like if I held them up side by side and I kind of took the side bezels away, it looks like the same exact phone, which is not a bad thing because it's an amazing display.
No,
but yeah, that's just kind of the way it is. They all are sort of moving towards that one glass sandwich type of look.
Sure, the glass sandwich. That's a good way to put it. I think as tech is developing, we might get to a point in the next decade, in the 2020s, where it's like perhaps the next innovation, the next big thing that everyone's going to be lining up to buy won't be the smartphones themselves because they're going to get as many function as possible, and it's just a speed test when it comes to what we're interested in buying. And recently I wanted to bring up that Apple this year has had a actual first in a while revenue increase in iPad sales. So I'm curious because you made a video on it a while back about the death of tablets. They're kind of dying off, and they have been for a few years. Do you think that given the new refresh of iPads, while it is just Apple, is there any chance of that tablet industry kind of making a comeback?
Oh man, I guess the general overarching thought of that video was like, if it's not an iPad, it's dead.
Pretty much.
You kind of have the tablet industry just being steered by this massive boat that is the iPad. Like if Apple does a lot with the iPad, then the tablet industry will see a little bit of a change. And if Apple kind of doesn't do much with the iPad with 1 year, then the tablet industry also just kind of doesn't do much. So yeah, I do think if we see, I mean, I love the ProMotion display on the new iPad Pro, so I think that's like kind of an underrated thing. Like when people see that in person, it looks really amazing.
Yeah, I love it.
That big change with iPads or with tablets can possibly bring a bigger change with all the tablets that follow it in general. But a resurgence, I don't know. It just kind of feels like they'll follow whatever Apple decides is priority. If Apple prioritizes making a thinner MacBook Air or something like that instead, then the tablet industry won't do too hot.
Right. Yeah, good point. And would you count, like, it's kind of fuzzy, but do you count the Surface Pros as being tablets? Because they kind of, when you use a Surface Pro, almost require a keyboard and mouse to really use all its features. And at that point, to me, I kind of start doubting, like, is this a tablet if I'm just using a keyboard and mouse a lot?
Yeah, I just kind of look at primary use case, and I think most people who buy that are buying a laptop when they buy it.
Right.
And when you kind of think of a tablet, you're sort of thinking you're holding something, you maybe watch movies on it, and maybe game a little bit and browse the web. People who buy a Surface Pro most likely are intentionally buying it so they can do a lot more than just that with it. So they buy a keyboard, they buy a mouse, they do all that. So I don't, as much as you can use it as a tablet, I don't count that towards the tablet revolution. I'd consider it more of a pure iPad type of thing, that slab, as a tablet.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's really hard to argue because it's running a full-fledged desktop OS, and like I said, almost every ad they're showing in is with a keyboard and trackpad. Everyone I know who owns one uses it with that. So at that point, it's like, what's the difference between that and a MacBook with a regular laptop with a touchscreen? It's kind of the same setup in a way.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's the reason people are buying it and the way they use it is 100% like a laptop for that.
Right. And as we're talking into laptops, I wanted to talk to a second because you and I both have a 15-inch MacBook Pro with the touch bar. And as time goes on, I think people have mixed feelings about the touch bar, and I'm curious if you have any more updated thoughts on, is this a gimmick? Is this here to stay? Or
well, that's interesting. So I guess my thought on the touch bar for my own use is it's literally two things. I use it to change the brightness and volume. That's the most common thing. And I use it to do audio levels in Final Cut Pro. So when I'm editing, when I take this to the whatever event I go to next with that thing to edit, it's just having those little buttons there that aren't keyboard. I don't think there is a keyboard shortcut actually to do the ramping where it ramps audio in and out of a certain clip.
I don't think so, no.
So there's just those two buttons on the trackpad that do something that I couldn't do faster or in any other way. So to the question of, is this a gimmick or will it keep living on? I think the more software developers make those functions that you can do something you couldn't ordinarily do with a simple tap, I think that'll determine if it lives on or not. I think Apple's kind of stuck to it for a little while now that they've debuted it and they just kind of have to ride it out. But I'm not even familiar with many other apps I use on the MacBook Pro that have a button in the trackpad that I just can't live without. But it's Final Cut Pro and audio and brightness.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. When it came out, I think we both mentioned the same thing, was that third parties would probably make or break the touch bar because Apple, of course, they invented it. They want to give as much support to it as they possibly can. But at the same time, we haven't seen much third-party support for it change much. But like you said, when we do need it, it's absolutely great. It's just for so few things. And one theory I have that I wanted to ask you about was I've seen a lot of concepts of the idea that, MacBook keyboards, they keep trying to squish them thinner. They keep trying to get the travel time down but still give a click. Now they're switching certain buttons to a touch screen, and they're trying to make MacBooks thinner. Do you think it's possible that in the future we'll have laptops that just have touchscreen bottoms and visuals up here, and that they'll switch the touch bar to expand to the whole base?
Yeah, I have one. I don't want to say it's a Lenovo, but I have a laptop that's a touchscreen keyboard, touch, and just a screen. So yeah, that experience is actually a little jarring because you're used to having. I guess Apple does the Taptic engine way better than anyone else because the feedback of typing on a keyboard is really unique in the tech world. There's no other mechanism like that. It's kind of an archaic thing, just a switch and a butterfly switch or whatever you have. So that's hard to replicate maybe in the future when like all these babies who are using iPads all grow up, they won't even care about keyboards. Like they'll probably be totally cool with a touch screen down here and a screen up here. But maybe we're in that awkward middle phase again where we just can't shake the keyboard.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of middle phases we're in at the moment. A lot of transitions.
We used to be in that with like smartphones. We used to have like a bunch of smartphones had physical keys. Apple came along and ditched it, and then there was about a 2 or 3 year gap where everyone else ditched it too, and then we were cool. We don't need it anymore. We replaced it.
Good point. Yeah, there was that time where like you always needed to pair an iPod or a smartphone to a computer to get it, booted up or to get your messages on it, and now they're all independent. Similarly.